Sign this. Consider it the late fee for 21 years of freeloading. Once the ink is dry, get out. I won't have your bastard child ruining my reputation. My father, Marcus, didn't even look up as he slid the legal waiver across the table. He was forcing me to sign away my grandmother's antique jewelry collection, the only money I had left in the world, so he could sell it to cover his gambling debts. I was 21. 6 months pregnant. And he was evicting me to save his own ego. I didn't beg. I just picked up his expensive pen and signed my name so hard the tip tore through the paper. Then I stood up, left my coat on the chair because he had paid for it, and walked out the front door forever. Have you ever been treated like a liability by the very people who were supposed to protect you? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. 10 years later, I was driving a German sports car that cost more than the house I grew up in. But I still remembered the exact smell of the heater in my old sedan. It smelled like burnt dust and desperation. Back then, I was 21, shivering in a parking lot, trying to figure out how to survive. Now, I am 31, the CEO of a private equity firm specializing in distressed debt, and I know exactly how much everyone costs. You see, in the Hall family, love was a transaction, and I was the one paying the bill. It didn't start with the blizzard. It started when I was 16. While other girls were picking out prom dresses, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a calculator, balancing Marcus's ledger. He called it teaching me responsibility. I called it hiding his losses. I learned early on that my father wasn't a businessman. He was a gambler with a nice suit. He would lose $10,000 at the track on a Tuesday and then scream at me on Wednesday because the electric bill was too high. I became the family accountant, the fixer, the unpaid servant. I managed the lies so Lydia could manage her image. And then there was Parker. If Marcus was the shark, Parker was the remora fish that attached itself to the underbelly. We dated for 2 years. I thought he loved me. I was naive. When he racked up $5,000 in credit card debt and threatened to leave town, I sold my first car, a beat-up Honda I had saved 3 summers for, to pay it off. I walked to work for 6 months so he wouldn't have a mark on his credit score. And how did he repay me? The week I told him I was pregnant, he vanished. He changed his number and left me to face Marcus alone. I learned a valuable lesson that day. Leeching isn't a behavior. It's a personality type. But the moment that truly broke me wasn't the money. It was my college graduation. I was valedictorian. I had worked 2 waitressing jobs to pay my own tuition because Marcus said his money was tied up in investments. I walked across that stage with a 4.0 GPA, scanning the crowd for my parents. I saw other families cheering, holding flowers, crying with pride. My section was empty. Later, I found out why. Marcus had heard about an exclusive art auction in the city. He spent the afternoon bidding on a counterfeit landscape painting to hang in his office because he thought it made him look like a connoisseur. He missed the proudest moment of my life to buy a fake. When I confronted them, Lydia did what she always did, she cried. She sat on her velvet sofa, dabbing her dry eyes, talking about how hard it was to keep up appearances, how many sacrifices they made for me. She begged me to understand their financial stress. I might have believed her if I hadn't found the receipts. Lydia wasn't broke. She was a hoarder of luxury. Under the guest bed, inside old shoeboxes, I found receipts for 3 designer handbags, totaling $12,000. She had bought them the same week she told me she couldn't afford to help me with my textbooks. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was an asset they depreciated until I had no value left. And then they wrote me off as a loss. They broke me then. But they didn't know they were training me. They taught me how to spot a liar, how to find hidden assets, and how to survive without a safety net. They thought they were discarding trash. They didn't realize they were recycling me into something bulletproof. I started my new life with exactly $500. That was what the pawnshop gave me for the garnet ring my mother had slipped into my pocket before I walked out the door. It was the only thing of value she owned that Marcus hadn't sold yet. I didn't cry when I handed it over to the broker. I looked at the cash and thought, this is the last thing they will ever give me. I didn't go into fashion or marketing. I went into the ugliest business on earth. Distressed debt. I started as a secretary at a collections firm, answering phones for $6 an hour. I listened. I learned how banks bundle bad loans, how foreclosure timelines work, and how a single missed signature can void a $1 million contract. I realized that in America, you don't need a gun to destroy someone. You just need to own their paper. 10 years later, I wasn't answering phones. I was the CEO of Phoenix Holdings, a private equity firm that bought toxic assets by the millions. I wore Italian suits and fired people who wasted my time. But I never forgot the goal. I wasn't building an empire for the sake of money. I was building an arsenal. I didn't stumble upon Marcus's failure by accident. I hunted him down. On a Tuesday morning, I sat with my lead analyst, Kevin. He was trying to pitch me a bundle of commercial loans in Chicago. I'm not interested in skyscrapers, Kevin, I said, spinning my chair to face the window. Filter the database for residential non-performing loans in New Jersey. Specifically, the Ridgewood area code, zip code 07450. Kevin looked confused. Boss, that's small potatoes. Single-family homes? Just do it. He typed for a moment, the blue light of the screen reflecting in his glasses. Okay. I see a few. There's a bundle from Chase coming up for auction next week. Mostly foreclosures. 50 properties. Is 142 Oak Creek Lane on the list? He scrolled. Yeah. It's the anchor asset. Big property, but it's underwater. Borrower is Marcus Hall. He's 6 months behind. Principal balance is $1.8 million. I felt a cold thrill shoot down my spine. It was happening. Marcus was drowning, and the sharks were circling. Buy the bundle, I said. Kevin hesitated. The other 49 loans are garbage, Rosie. We'll lose money on the package. I don't care. Offer 10% over asking. Cash. I want that bundle closed by Friday. I overpaid by $200,000 to buy a pile of junk debt, just to secure the rights to one specific house. It was the most satisfying check I ever wrote. Once the deal closed, I owned Marcus. I was his bank. I was his creditor. I could have foreclosed on him the next day, kicked him out, and sold the house. But that felt too easy. I wanted to see how he had managed to keep that house for so long while gambling away the company profits. I ordered the physical credit files transferred to my office. When the box arrived, I locked the door. I flipped through the loan origination documents from 5 years ago. I wanted to see his application. I wanted to know what collateral he had used to secure a jumbo loan when his credit was already sliding. And there it was. The smoking gun. Under assets, Marcus had listed heirloom jewelry collection. Appraised value $250,000. He had used my grandmother's jewelry as collateral. But that wasn't the crime. The crime was the attachment. Stapled to the back of the appraisal was a copy of the waiver I had signed in the blizzard. He had submitted that document to the bank to prove he had clear title to the jewels. He told the bank those assets were his. Free and clear. I smiled, and the room felt instantly warmer. Marcus hadn't just been cruel. He had been sloppy. By submitting that waiver to a federally insured bank to secure a mortgage, he had committed loan fraud. He claimed the assets were his. But the date on the waiver proved he coerced the transfer after he was already in debt. I closed the file. I didn't just have the power to take his house. I had the power to put him in federal prison. But prison was too private. I needed something public. I needed him to sign his life away, thinking he had won. Before I dropped the hammer, I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. Draft a purchase agreement. We're going to make Mr. Hall an offer he can't refuse. I could have seized the house the moment the ink dried on the debt purchase. I could have sent a sheriff to post an eviction notice on the front door and watched from a parked car as Marcus threw a tantrum on the lawn. But that felt insufficient. Eviction is a tragedy. I wanted a comedy. I wanted Marcus to walk into his own destruction with a smile on his face, believing he was the smartest man in the room. To catch a rat, you use cheese. To catch a narcissist, you use a mirror. I created a shell company called Apex Capital. It had no employees, no office, just a P.O. box and a very expensive-looking letterhead. Then I hired Sterling, a contract lawyer who looked like he was born in a Brooks Brothers suit. I gave him a script and a very specific set of instructions. Marcus is drowning, I told Sterling. But he will never admit he needs a life raft. You have to sell him the rope, as if it's a gold necklace. Sterling met Marcus at a steakhouse. I paid for the dinner. According to Sterling, Marcus ordered the most expensive scotch on the menu, trying to play the part of the titan of industry. Even though his credit card had been declined at the gas station that morning, Sterling laid out the bait. The sale-leaseback agreement. The pitch was simple and seductive. Apex Capital would pay off the entire $1.8 million mortgage debt instantly. In exchange, Marcus would sign the deed over to the company. The debt would be wiped clean. His credit would be saved. But here is the best part, Mr. Hall, Sterling had said, sliding the term sheet across the white tablecloth. We don't want to occupy the home. We are passive investors. We want you to stay. We will lease the property back to you for the rest of your life. The rent? Marcus had asked, swirling his drink. $1 a year. It was a deal too good to be true. Any rational person would have asked, what's the catch? Any prudent businessman would have hired an attorney to scour the fine print for the trap door. But Marcus wasn't rational or prudent. He was desperate and vain. This was the velvet noose. I knew Marcus's greatest fear wasn't poverty. It was irrelevance. He was terrified the neighbors would find out he was a failure. This deal allowed him to keep the house, keep the address, and keep pretending he was rich. But just to be sure he didn't read the contract too closely, specifically Clause 14b regarding material misrepresentation, I told Sterling to add the ego clauses. "We recognize your status in the community," Sterling told him. "We would like to designate you as the honorary director of estate management. We'll even put a plaque on the gate." Sterling told me later that Marcus actually puffed out his chest. He didn't see a predator taking his home. He saw a fan appreciating his greatness. He negotiated for the right to keep his name on the mailbox and to approve any landscaping changes. He spent 20 minutes arguing about the font size on the imaginary plaque, completely ignoring the fact that he was signing away his ownership rights. He thought he had conned a stupid investment fund. He thought he had found a loophole that would let him live rent-free forever while someone else paid the property taxes. He called Sterling the next morning. "I'll sign," he said. "Set it up." I was sitting in my office when Sterling texted me the confirmation. I looked at the file on my desk, the bank records, the loan application, the fraudulent waiver. The trap was set. Marcus was going to walk into that closing room thinking he was securing his legacy. He didn't know he was signing his eviction notice. The closing was scheduled for a Friday afternoon in the glass-walled conference room of a Manhattan law firm that charged $800 an hour just to breathe their air. I wasn't in the room yet. I was watching the security feed from the adjacent office, waiting for my cue. Marcus and Lydia arrived 15 minutes late. It was a power move. Or at least, they thought it was. They walked in looking like royalty returning from exile. Marcus wore a pinstripe suit that was slightly too tight around the waist, a relic from his glory days. Lydia was draped in a cashmere shawl, clutching a handbag she had definitely pulled out of storage. And trailing behind them like a well-trained puppy was Parker. My ex-boyfriend was now carrying my father's briefcase. It was almost poetic. The two men who had betrayed me were now dependent on each other to maintain the illusion of relevance. They treated Sterling, my proxy lawyer, like the help. Marcus didn't even look up from the head of the polished oak table. "Water," he snapped. "Sparkling. And fix the temperature in here. It's drafty." Sterling didn't react. He simply nodded to a paralegal and slid the first stack of papers forward. "Mr. Hall, we're on a tight schedule. The wire to clear your debt is queued, but we need signatures first." The top document was the deed in lieu of foreclosure, the legal handoff that transferred the house from Marcus to my shell company. One signature, and he stopped being an owner. He became a guest. Marcus didn't read a word. Desperate to erase the $1.8 million from his credit report, he scribbled his name immediately. Scratch. Scratch. Just like that. The house I grew up in, the house he threw me out of, was mine. "Excellent," Sterling said, filing the deed away. "Now, the leaseback agreement. This grants you the lifetime right to occupy the property for the nominal fee of $1 per year." That was the trap. Because buried deep inside that lease, page 47, was Clause 14b. The honesty clause. Marcus finally put on his reading glasses and leaned back like he was auditioning for responsible businessman. He flipped the first page and announced, loudly, "I need to review the landscaping maintenance terms. I won't have your company hiring substandard gardeners." On the monitor, I watched him stall, dragging out the moment, trying to reclaim control. If he actually read the contract, he might notice the clause about material misrepresentation. Sterling glanced at his watch, sharp, deliberate, and let out an impatient breath. "Mr. Hall," he said, voice dropping into urgent professionalism, "I need to be transparent. The Federal Reserve wire window closes in exactly 4 minutes." Marcus blinked. "What?" "If the signed lease isn't uploaded to the escrow portal by 4 p.m., funds can't be released today. That means foreclosure proceedings automatically trigger at 9 tomorrow morning. The sheriff will be dispatched." It was a lie. The money was already sitting safely in an escrow account I controlled. There was no wire deadline. But Marcus didn't know that he only knew fear. 4 minutes? Lydia gasped, clutching her pearls. "Marcus, sign it. We can't have the sheriff there tomorrow. The neighbors will see." Marcus stared at the thick contract, then at the clock. The second hand ticked like a countdown. Public humiliation beat caution. Panic beat pride. "Fine," he snapped, flipping straight to the signature page. "But I expect discretion." "Of course," Sterling said smoothly. Marcus signed. He didn't read the middle. He didn't see the clause that stated the lease was void ab initio from the beginning if the tenant had lied on the original loan paperwork or misrepresented underlying assets. He set the pen down and smirked at Parker like he'd just won a war. "You see, Parker? That's how you handle investors. They need us more than we need them." Sterling collected the papers and tapped his earpiece. "The documents are executed," he said to the room, though he was really speaking to me. "Send in the chairman." The heavy oak doors opened. The only sound was the click of my heels across marble. I walked in slowly, deliberately, wearing a tailored white suit, sharp, pristine, expensive. Nothing like the shivering, pregnant girl who left that house 10 years ago without a coat. I didn't look at the view. I didn't look at the lawyer. I looked straight at Marcus. His smile shattered. Lydia froze with her hand halfway to her necklace. Parker actually dropped his files. Papers scattered across the floor, and nobody moved to pick them up. Rosie? Marcus choked out, disbelief curdling into irritation. What are you doing here? Did they hire you as administrative support? Even now, he tried to place me beneath him. He couldn't picture a world where I wasn't the help. I didn't answer. I walked to the head of the table. Sterling stood instantly and pulled out the chair for me. Mr. Hall, Sterling said, his voice suddenly stripped of all deference. Please meet the chairman of Phoenix Holdings. Your creditor. Marcus barked a laugh. This is a joke. You? You bought my debt? I own the debt, Marcus, I said evenly. And as of 3 minutes ago, I lifted the deed, still smelling of fresh ink. I own the house. Marcus leaned back, arms crossed, clawing for control. Congrats. You're my landlord. Read the lease, Rosie. I have a lifetime right to occupy for $1. You can't touch me. He tapped the leaseback agreement like it was armor. About that lease, I said softly. I didn't reach into a bag. I reached for the laptop Sterling had set in front of me and turned the screen toward them. When I bought your mortgage, I didn't just buy your debt. I bought the files. Every document you submitted to the bank over the last 10 years. I clicked. The large screen lit up with his loan application. This is your refinance paperwork from 5 years ago, I said. You listed grandmother's heirloom jewelry as a personal asset, free and clear. Marcus narrowed his eyes. So what? It was my jewelry. Was it? I clicked again. Up came a high-resolution scan. The waiver of inheritance crumpled, tear-stained. My jagged signature pressed too hard. The date was stamped there like a bruise. The night of the blizzard. You submitted this waiver to the bank to prove title to the assets, I said, voice cold and precise. A document obtained through coercion. You used it to secure a federally regulated mortgage. Then I lifted the lease he'd signed in panic. Clause 14b. I read aloud. The material honesty clause. This lease is void ab initio if the tenant has ever knowingly provided false financial information regarding the property's underlying assets. The blood drained from Marcus's face. You lied to the bank to get the house, I said. And because you lied then, you've breached the contract now. I tore the leaseback agreement clean in half. The rip cracked through the silent room. You signed the deed. So I own the house, I said. But the lease is void. Which means you aren't a tenant, Marcus. I held his stare. You're a trespasser. For a heartbeat, nobody breathed. Then Marcus exploded, not over money, not over homelessness, but over me. You ungrateful little mistake, he roared, veins bulging. I made you. You're nothing without me. I'm Marcus Hall. I'm the victim. It wasn't financial collapse that broke him. It was the narcissistic injury, the unbearable truth that the scapegoat had beaten him. Lydia wailed. Rosie, please, we're your parents. I looked at her. I did it. It's done. Parker stepped forward, my ex, the man who abandoned me when I was pregnant, eyes calculating its speed. He saw the ship sinking and went hunting for a lifeboat. Rosie, he said, voice dipping into fake intimacy. Wow. That was impressive. You'll need someone to manage the estate. I know where he keeps the keys, the maintenance schedule. He reached out a hand like we were friends. I didn't even look at him. I looked past him to the security team waiting by the door. Get them out, I said. All of them. Rosie, wait. Parker stammered, charm evaporating. You're trespassing on corporate property, I said, closing the laptop. And Parker? You're fired. Security didn't drag them. They didn't need drama. They simply escorted them, 2 men in black suits, applying the quiet, unyielding pressure of people who remove trespassers for a living. Parker tried to linger, tried to catch my eye one last time. Sterling stepped into his path without blinking. The exit is that way, sir. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't give a lecture. I just watched. I walked to the window overlooking the street, 20 stories down. They spilled out onto the sidewalk, Marcus red-faced and shouting. Lydia sobbing into her shawl. Parker throwing up his hands before peeling away. Their alliance dissolved the second the money disappeared. I turned from the glass. I didn't need to watch the rest. I picked up my phone and called the only person who mattered. Mommy? Iris chirped, bright and unburdened. Hi, baby, I said. And for the first time in 10 years my chest didn't feel tight. Pack your bags. We're moving. To the new apartment? No. I smiled, looking at the deed on the table. To the house with the big garden. The one with the oak trees. After that, Marcus and Lydia never recovered. Foreclosure is public record. And Ridgewood gossip travels faster than Wi-Fi. They lost the house, the status, and the friends who only loved them for their wine cellar. Last I heard, they ended up in a 2-bedroom rental in a neighboring town, spending their days blaming everyone but themselves. I never spoke to them again. I didn't have to ban them from the property. They already knew who held the deed. I broke the cycle not by fixing them, but by outgrowing them. I took the stones they threw and built a fortress they could never enter. Sometimes the best revenge isn't burning their house down. It's buying it, renovating it, and living happily inside it while they watch from the street. If you enjoyed this story of smart justice, hit subscribe. The next one is even wilder.